Good morning, campers. Welcome back. I got to tell you, we are about to blast off into Be Well together this week because I am so excited to introduce to you astronaut Steve Smith. We have our first astronaut. This is so exciting. Yeah. For those of you who do not know Steve, he brings an incredible, just one-of-a-kind background to space, to business, to athletics, just a really, really impressive human being. As an astronaut, Steve has traveled 16 million miles in space. He has flown on 4 space shuttle missions and performed seven spacewalks, including 5 to repair the Hubble Space Telescope. He's also an athlete. He is an All-American in swimming and water polo, a 2-time NCAA champion. You know, he's just an average guy here, Steve Smith, who's joining us this morning. So today he is going to talk to us a little bit about his experiences in isolation, which is pretty relevant, and how to maintain positivity and the dynamics of working in a team in really difficult conditions. So with that, Steve, I turn the show over to you. Welcome to Be Well Together.
Well, thank you, Jody, for that kind introduction, and welcome to everyone who's online or watching a recording of this. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be with you today. I have had a chance as an astronaut to live in lockdown, both before a flight and during the flight, and from that came many lessons that I'd like to pass on with you today. Prior to a flight, we actually live in something that we call quarantine. We go to a government building where we have kind of a large apartment where myself and my 6 or 7 crewmates would live. Each of us did have our own bedroom, but then we also had a common area and, of course, a common dining area. And in that quarantine situation, we were not allowed to leave the building. That may sound familiar to you. And it's because they want to make sure that when we depart Earth a week or 2 later, that none of us have picked up any kind of an illness. So they're really controlling who comes into the building. It's usually just the people who are helping us with everyday things like eating, and also with keeping the facility clean, and also an occasional instructor. We are allowed to see one family member, and that's our spouse or significant other, but only after they've gone through a health screening. We're not allowed to go to the mall. We're not allowed to go to movies, shopping, not even allowed to go home or even get out in our own car. They're really trying to protect us, but it's a lifestyle that may sound somewhat familiar to you right now. The only time we can leave the building is if we do have a very special simulator session to get some final training in. And again, it's completely controlled in terms of who's there and the cleanliness of the facility. And also we can go outside and exercise. So that all may sound familiar. At the end of that quarantine, we blast off into space, which is an incredible experience in itself. But the place that we're going is like being in a very, very, very small recreational vehicle with 6 or 7 other people. The space shuttle has basically 2 rooms. One is about 10 by 10 feet, and the ceiling's about 8 feet. That's the downstairs. And the upstairs is even smaller. The ceiling's only about 6 or 7 feet. And that workspace is probably 6 by 5 feet. So it's this very constrained place. No one has their own bedroom. In that work area, you have to not only work, but also, of course, eat, clean yourself up. There's no shower in space because there's no gravity, of course. And also there's a bathroom there. It's very small off to the side. So it's this really strange, constrained life where you're with 7 people who you've gotten to know very well through your training. But it's a very unusual situation. You're basically in a tin can for a couple of weeks with other people. Now, I will say that the view is pretty amazing. So we do have some other assets on hand. You can see over my shoulder what it looks like. We are traveling 17,500 miles an hour. So we go around the Earth every 90 minutes. So in one day, we did have the benefit of seeing 16 gorgeous sunrises and 16 gorgeous sunsets. And of course, with zero gravity, I described the size of the room, which even in zero gravity is small, but you do have the opportunity to kind of float away from everybody. You can kind of float up to the ceiling and kind of go up in that corner up there, for example, something you can't do on Earth, but it's still a huge challenge. And anyway, from those experiences, I learned a lot about living in confinement, and so I'll pass that on. But before we go any further, I just wanted to mention on behalf of Salesforce leadership and myself, We send our very best wishes to you and your family for safety and health as we all take on this monster, this virus. And of course, heartfelt thoughts to all of you who have had more direct impact or even indirect impact that are significant. We send, really deep, deep, deep wishes for strength, spiritual well-being, and physical recovery. In our family, we do have a young person in our family, a godchild of mine, who's been fighting this thing for about 5 weeks. And speaking to her over the phone has really brought it home to us and how terrible it is. And so we send our best wishes for all of you who have been more directly or indirectly affected. And so now let me talk about life as an astronaut and what I learned that might be helpful to you in terms of your well-being in the weeks and months ahead of us as life changes. First, let's just remind ourselves that the basics that are true that helped you live a strong life before this all happened, the basics are the same basics that we're being reminded of now by the experts. And they're also the same basics that we used both in pre-flight quarantine and in space to take care of ourselves and to perform well and to be happy, to have this spiritual well-being. And so they're the basics. Just to remind you what they are, it's to have, of course, a schedule. Just because you're working at home doesn't mean you just kind of don't have a schedule anymore. So make sure that you maintain a schedule and that you live to it. That's really important, not only having the schedule, but also living to it. And so in that schedule, you want to make sure, of course, that you're getting enough sleep, you're getting enough exercise, that you continue to eat well and on schedule. The first couple of weeks, I really struggled with the schedule because I realized I was sometimes eating lunch at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So stay on that schedule. That schedule will help make sure you get enough sleep, help us to make sure you eat well, and that you get enough exercise every day. Even just 10 minutes of exercise or maybe a quick walk has been shown, of course, to raise the chemistry in your body and to raise your spirit. I have found in this era that I'm actually getting a little bit more sleep than I was before. And I'm also finding that I'm actually getting a little more exercise than I did before. One of the things I've discovered, for example, is that in addition to the daily exercise I was doing in the morning or sometime before noon, I found that a little 10-minute or 15-minute second workout, a walk around the block, for example, at dinner time, has this huge benefit to my life. And so make sure that you keep this schedule. The final thing on this basic things that we've always heard about is to not isolate yourself, to make sure that you continue to communicate with others. For some of us who are a little bit more on the introvert side, it definitely takes a big effort, but you've got to stay connected to other people. It's unfortunate that the label that we've put on what we're doing the last couple months is social distancing. That is actually the last thing we want to do, and it's the last way we want to look at this. It's really physical distancing. That's really at the core of what we're doing. So stay in contact with your friends. One of the things I've done, for example, is reached out to people I haven't been in communication with for a long time. It's shocked them. Usually in the phone conversations we've had, they do about 80% of the talking. So in some ways I'm bringing a service to them too, but they're also helping me. So stay connected, reach out there. It's not social distancing, it's physical distancing. And so now 3 kind of major comments on lessons I've learned having been an astronaut. The first is to take a view of the situation we're in as this incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to improve yourself and your life. Come out at the end of this different than the way you started. It's an opportunity to improve your life, to shape your brand. And so view it as this incredibly unique opportunity to improve your life exponentially. And we have had weeks already behind us. And so, of course, it's not enough time to get a new college degree or learn how to play a musical instrument or how to speak a language. But at least you can look at the opportunities you've had already to maybe get started on something. And if you haven't, we have a lot of time ahead of us still where we're going to be living life differently. So one thing I would encourage you to do is at the end of today's presentation, have it on your schedule to take 5 or 10 minutes to look at the person that you've been the last 8 weeks and try and figure out what has already happened that I can actually implement in the rest of my life. And so maybe there's a little bit of a skill you started to pick up, or at least you've commenced learning that language or that musical instrument, or some other particular skill. Maybe there's some training that you've done or that you can take. Maybe you've learned that you can communicate better and differently with people, maybe more often, maybe with more substance. That's one of the big ones that's come from, for me. I think a lot of us have now realized there's different ways to communicate, and they're not hard, and they're widely available. Maybe you've realized that the previous lifestyle you had was not sustainable in some way. Maybe it's the way you spent your time. Maybe you traveled too much. Maybe the way that you respected the earth was not appropriate. Maybe it was the way that you were treating other people around you that was not appropriate. And so take that 5 or 10 minutes today to look at what's happened so far. I think you'll find dozens of things to learn from and use those in your future life. Maybe you've learned in this lockdown and new lifestyle that the life you living was too complicated and you had too many things. Maybe it's time to simplify your life and also to maybe have less material possessions. So these are just some examples of things that you can look back on what's already happened in the past 6 to 8 weeks and learn from them and incorporate them in the future. Or maybe I've sparked some thought in your mind that as you look to the future, there are new things that you can do. But do not leave this opportunity in life the same as the same person that entered it. I hope that years all look back and say that the person, Steve Smith, that existed on March 1st, 2020, is a different person and a better person now, having exited this. There's lots of sayings that kind of summarize this. One is, adversity is a terrible thing to waste. Another is never squander a good crisis. And as my mother always used to say, find a way to make lemonade out of lemons. So look for some exponential gain in your life that comes from this. Now, the second one I'll mention has to do with mental health and spiritual well-being. And previously, I talked about having a schedule to increase your sleep, your exercise, how well you eat, and how often and how well you communicate with people. I left off a big one because I wanted to dedicate an entire thought to it, and that is again about your spiritual well-being. This is the 21st century, and I think what we've all realized now is that our mental health, the health of our brain and our spirit, is just like any other body system that we have. We take care of our skin, we take care of our eyes, we take care of our heart. It is now part of the cadre of things that we take care of, to take care of our mind and our spirit. We're now encouraged to talk about it even with friends or professionals if we need to. For some of us, that's still a little bit hard, but the time has arrived to do that. And so I encourage you to look at how you're doing often. It's okay, of course, to have not all positive feelings about what's going on. None of us want to be in this situation, but it is what it is. But it is okay, of course, to have these feelings. And I would encourage you not to bottle them up, as all of the previous generations have done, but to find someone to talk to. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend, or maybe it's a professional. It's the right thing to do in this era. It is a body system just like the others. To be a little bit more specific, in terms of the stress that we're having right now and the things we're being asked to do, one of the ways that I was able to accept the danger of flying into space and to accept the fact that I might be away from my family in a very remote place when something happens to them. It was just a very difficult thing to do as an explorer. One of the techniques I used was to always remember the big picture. Ask yourself, what you're doing right now, are you doing it for a good cause, for a good reason? Now, we're all making massive sacrifices, some of us even financially, because of this situation. For me, the big picture, though, is that I'm part of this big team that lives on this beautiful blue planet behind me. And some of them are really, really exposed to this disease and really frail and can be hurt very badly by it. So for me, the sacrifices I'm making, keeping the very big picture, as painful as they are, it's a reminder of why I'm doing it. So always remember what you're doing and take a look at the big picture of what you're doing. I think you'll find that that will help you persevere and move forward in these times. The second thing, though, is when you are moving along this path and when you have a task in front of us, it's the opposite. It's at that point you need to have this Zen-like focus on what you're doing. You need to do your best you can at that particular task that's right in front of you. In many ways, it's all about mindfulness. It's living in the moment, enjoying what you're doing right at that point, and doing the best you can at what you are doing. So it's that focus. The other thing I'll say about mental health is you all need time for yourself. And certainly even in the space station, for example, and on the space shuttle, we were encouraged by the medical community that supported us to find time for yourself. Now, on the space shuttle, for example, it's such a closed environment that you might float up to that corner up there, take your laptop with you, kind of attach yourself to the ceiling over there and just work on email for a little while. And so you are taking command of your situation and finding your own little bubble, your own little quiet time. And so you really need to do that here on Earth also. It's not something that you want to stay in 24 hours a day, or even for me, multiple hours per day. It's something that you go to occasionally to recharge yourself, to recharge your batteries, to recharge your spirit. And certainly, it's also important as a team member that when you're in this closed confinement, to honor the other members of your team who are taking their time. So it was kind of an unspoken rule, for example, in these closed confines of either pre-flight quarantine or actually in space flight, to observe when someone was obviously taking some time to themselves and to let them have that moment to recharge. And again, once you're done recharging, re-engage, don't isolate yourself. The last thing I'll say is that anytime you're facing adversity and tough times, the single thing that you can do the best to recharge your batteries and spirit is by being grateful for what you have and taking action to help other people. It doesn't mean that you have to do these amazing things like some of the people you hear in the world are doing. You don't have to donate hundreds of hours per week at the local food shelter. There are some people that can do that and are moved by that and have the resources to do that. For the rest of us, there are dozens and dozens of small things that we can do in our lives to reach out to help other people. Maybe it's someone that's just across the room in your own family pod there. Maybe it's the neighbor. Maybe it's someone that you make a phone call to. But you find these small things that you can do, because it's been proven for hundreds of years that the single best thing that you can do for yourself is to help other people. It shows that you're grateful for what you have, and that reward that you have for helping other people will just really change the chemistry in your body and the spirit in your mind. And so help takes many forms. Find a way to help other people. And so with that, Jody, I'll hand it back over to you if you'd like to have people ask questions.
You are incredibly inspiring. Thank you so much. I have an immense amount of gratitude for your time today. Really, really great. I actually have a couple of questions before I'll invite Natalie Harris, our guest moderator today, coming to us from campaign operations and CSG. But first, I've got you here. I'd like to ask you a few questions yourself. One of them is, when you were in that really confined space with your other, your fellow astronauts, how do you kind of navigate when someone's just having a really bad day? You know, when somebody's attitude is not great, or, you know, they're just fed up with the situation, and you're all still stuck in there. And, you know, by design, they probably are not out to bring the whole unit down emotionally, but there's not a lot of ways to escape. So I'm curious about your experiences in that, and those parallels that we might draw for those of us who have families or kids, or just have spent a lot of time with a partner or a roommate, how we might better navigate these things.
Sure, there's a couple thoughts of it, and one, of course, comes from being a family member too. So it's not just about being in space with other people, but also even as a family member. But it really takes, I think, a couple attributes. One is bravery. You know, you need to address a situation like that and use all the skills that you have to do it. The second thing is, you know, you need to be empathetic. And, you know, one of the ways that I view these big things that we're doing is that it's really a team effort. We don't even know most of the members on our team, right? There's 7 billion people in the world. We're all working together on this. But back to your question, you know, you need to step forward and the situation needs to be addressed. And despite the fact that you might be angry at that person or disappointed at that person, you've got to draw on these skills to draw on these, yes, to draw on these skills to be empathetic, to draw on just all of your bravery and creative language to just talk about the team. You know, usually it's the best way is to talk about the team. It's not just about me that I'm coming to you, but it's really about the team. We have this greater goal, you know, just reminding them of what the greater goal is. And you know what? A lot of times, just putting your hand on someone's shoulder and just looking them in the eyes and go, hey, you know, we're trying to get this major event completed here. I'd love to help you. Let's keep the team moving forward. Sometimes that just flips the bit.
Great. Very simple and very powerful. Yep. Yeah. One more question for you, just about your own resilience. You know, you've talked about a lot of coping tech and mechanisms and things that you've learned, but I think it's pretty fascinating that you didn't quite get into NASA on that first try that you went for it, and you had to keep pursuing your dream and overcoming many obstacles to get there. And I was wondering if you might share a little bit about that experience and kind of your advice for really keeping that positive belief in yourself during a pretty challenging time.
Well, thank you for that question. So it was a 30-year journey for me. And so I hope that everyone else's big goals don't take as long as they did for me. But yes, so I was rejected by the Air Force in high school and then 4 times by NASA as a professional engineer. And the thing that kept me going is I had found something I loved. I loved pilots. I loved airplanes. I loved watching the astronauts. I loved exploration. And so anytime you can find this thing that you strongly believe in, the pathway there, when it becomes bumpy and discouraging, will not cause you to turn around. And that's because you see that passionate thing that you want so badly ahead of you. And so I often encourage young people, well, actually, even at any point in your life, you know, find the things that you're so passionate about. I really believe that grit is something that most people are born with to some extent, and that it's much like a muscle that you can actually build stronger and stronger. From the experts, I've heard that the single best way to build grit, besides having this passionate dream for something that you're going to pursue for a long period of time, is to help other people, because it helps build your personal view of yourself. It's this incredible, valuable feeling of helping other people. And so that's really the one step that I have heard that research supports on building this self-resilience. But, you know, the paths are never going to be smooth. Turning away is an awful option. Sometimes I felt like I was crawling on my hands and knees. The other thing I'll add, if you don't mind me taking another 15 seconds, is on this path, when these constraints and obstacles come in your way, you've got to have this incredible belief that I can get through anything. Be excited about the opportunity. Think really creatively about how to get by these obstacles. That's the way entrepreneurs are. They believe that every obstacle that comes to them can be overcome.
I love your energy. It is just so contagious.
I've learned to do that in this era. So this is an example of looking into that little camera and trying to connect with people, right? It's a new skill.
It's working. Okay, Natalie, tell us, what do our employees, what questions are they posting up in our own community there?
Absolutely. So thank you again, astronaut Steve Smith, for joining us. And as we look at your backdrop there, you know, looking at a world without borders, how does that speak to your sense of community, especially during like a time of like this pandemic? And what's something that you learned from being in outer space that we could sort of apply to our world when we look at it without borders?
Yeah, seeing the Earth from space changes your life. It changes the way you think about it, because you realize it's an island. We live on an island. It's this blue marble island that's in this vast black ocean. So when we back up away and look at it, it looks like an island. And when you view it as an island, it really gives you 2 strong feelings. The first is that we need to take care of the island. It's our only place to live. There's no plan B. But the second one is you see no borders, and you realize that we are one global community, one global family. And so in something like this pandemic, you really get this sense that we all are in this together. It's a common term right now. but we really do need to help other people and be nice to other people. It's one global community.
That's beautiful. And I've got one other question. I'll kind of change the tone a little bit. I found out something and I thought it was very interesting. Salesforce prides itself on diversity and inclusion, so much so that it made equality one of its core values. And I learned recently that the next trip to the moon will include the first woman. And so how has, your industry stepped towards diversity and inclusion? How do you think that's going to impact the new sort of like the industry and having someone new in space?
Well, I'm so incredibly proud to have worked for NASA for 28 years because it really was one of the first companies and federal agencies to move forward to trying to diversify. I'm so thrilled that the movie Hidden Figures, for example, came out a couple of years ago to show that story. I have found at Mission Control that it was at least half women for the last couple decades. I've had more women bosses than I've had men bosses at NASA, which is also fascinating. And so, yes, the NASA believes that the next American to walk on the moon will be a woman. And for me, it goes really back to this view behind me. I mean, we're all one global community. The space program should reflect the same diversity as our population. And so I'm just so proud to have worked in an industry where that's happening.
Beautiful. So much so. Jody, do you want me to keep firing away or do you have another question?
You are on a roll.
Okay.
Go.
I'm going to keep going. So one final question I think I'll ask. When we talk about the explorer's mind and the beginner's mind, and we're moving into this sort of uncharted territory, what are some of the sort of immediate thoughts that you think of as an explorer? You talk about your affection with Jacques Cousteau. And so what are some of the immediate thoughts when we're moving into this uncharted territory as beginners?
Sure, well, you bet. Thank you. So the explorer's mindset, this mindset of explorers have, is the same mindset that high achievers use, go-getters use, entrepreneurs use. And so it's a mindset that almost certainly everybody on this telecon has used before. I'm just reminding you that whatever label you put on it, it's something that's incredibly easily available and has incredible value to it. And what it is to think big, to think really big. No matter what's going on, to have these audacious goals. That's what explorers do. They want to go places and be places and find things that no one else has ever done before. And so we have that in our personal lives to think really big. The second is knowing that that pathway to that big goal is going to be bumpy along the way, and to have this spirit that those are learning experiences when those bad things happen, that I have this incredible growth mindset. I am not just constrained by what I was born with, that I can find creative solutions to get around these challenges. And finally, that if I'm passionate about it and it's so meaningful, I'm going to do it for a long time. And that's called grit.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. I have to tell you that this has been amazing. Greatest start to a Monday I can recall having in a long time. So thank you. And Dave McCarthy is an amazing production guy on these calls, and he has a funny joke that I'm going to tell on his behalf, and we'll see how you do with that, and that's how we'll wrap this up today. Dave wanted to know what your favorite key on the keyboard is.
Oh my gosh, no one's ever asked me that before. I think just off the top of my head, I think I'll say enter, because it means I'm sending my thoughts to someone and hopefully advice to someone that will benefit from it.
Okay, well, you've totally nailed that. That has definitely happened. But the real answer we think might be the space bar.
Yeah. That's right.
All right.
There are space enthusiasts everywhere. Thank you so much, Salesforce, for the opportunity to spread the joy. And to all of you, stay strong. We will get through this and come out better on the other side.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Everyone, be safe, be healthy, be well, and we will see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.